right, so let's talk about how we're going to operate as an organization on a global basis and how we're going to achieve a successful operation. Now, we've talked before about the need to leverage local talent. What does that mean if we say that we're going to leverage local talent? We have a number of issues that we need to resolve if we're going to operate on a global basis. We talked about where our manufacturing capability is going to be located. So remember, we said in some cases we might have our manufacturing located in our home country and then export the products overseas. We said exporting could be a mode of entry into a particular market. Or we said in some cases we might use foreign direct investment as a mode of entry. And in that case, what does that suggest about where manufacturing is going to occur?
It's going to be over there in that country.
Yeah, it's going to be in the host country, so that means that we would set up manufacturing operations in the host country, whether it's bottling equipment, for example, whatever it is that we need to manufacture the product in the host country. But if we're going to export or we're going to manufacture in the host country, so those are manufacturing issues. There's other issues that need to be resolved. So manufacturing is certainly an important strategic decision. Are we going to make the product in our home country, or are we going to make the product in the host country? So we also need to think about whether or not we're going to buy the product. That's another option. So very often we talk about make versus buy. Either we're going to manufacture the product ourselves, or we're going to buy the product and then resell it. But if we assume that we're going to make the product, then we're either going to make it in the home country or we're going to make it in the host country. So do we follow? Make versus buy. If we decide to make it, then we're going to either make it in the home country or in a host country. And it may be a host country that's in close proximity to a market that we want to penetrate. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be making the product in every market that we're going to sell it. Does that make sense? So for example, what that would mean is that we might have a large manufacturing facility in France. And that manufacturing facility is going to service several different European countries. So we might set up our manufacturing in France to provide products for, let's say, half a dozen different European countries. So that's a strategic decision that needs to be made. It doesn't mean that we need to have manufacturing operations in France, Italy, England, Belgium, Denmark, Switzerland, Austria. We don't need to have manufacturing operations in all of those countries. But certainly it's significant if we're going to manufacture outside of our home country. So very important. But then besides that, what are the other implications? What's the other challenge? Once we say that we're going to operate outside of our home country, we said, well, we have to decide if we're going to manufacture in a host country. But whether we manufacture in a host country or not, there's still issues involved in setting up a strategic business unit in France. or any place outside of the home country. What does that suggest? What's our challenge? If we're going to set up operations outside of our home country, what's going to be the challenge? What does it mean to have a strategic business unit or a wholly owned subsidiary operating outside of the home country? What does that present for us in terms of challenges?
I was gonna say that basically you could, you have to look into, like I think we gave examples in the past about like, what their economy is like, or what their, what the conditions, like maybe war conditions, if they're constantly getting bombed, you don't want to set up a new infrastructure there. You have to look into that area as a whole to see if it's something that's worthwhile.
So, everybody catch what Ezra is saying? There's regulatory issues. We got to look at the level of political stability, or in some cases, the level of political instability. We have to determine the level of civil unrest. We have to look at economic factors. And so, those are all important issues. Assuming that we find those to be at least somewhat favorable or meet our requirements for risk, or is not above the level of risk that we're willing to accept. How are we going to implement? We need people. So very often we say our greatest resource is our human resource. So we need to decide who's going to run this subsidiary, this division, this strategic business unit. Because what does it mean if we say, okay, we have an office. We have an office in Paris. We have an office in London. How is the office going to function? What's an option for us? What are some of the options? We have to hire people. So what do? Do we hire? Go ahead, tell us.
Well, you can hire the people of the host country, the nationals, or you can bring in your own people from the home country, or there's many options.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Belsky is telling us is we could hire locals, which is certainly many reasons why we would do that. What's one of the reasons? Why would we want to hire locals or nationals in a particular market? What's one of the advantages?
They know their market, and the culture also. They know the culture.
Yeah, so they understand the needs and wants of that particular market. They understand the demand, they understand the culture and the different cultural nuances that's going to be otherwise a challenge for us in terms of our sales organization and our marketing organization, and also legal aspects of us operating in that particular market. So you definitely want to hire some nationals because they have first-hand knowledge, practical knowledge, street smarts, if you will. It's different if you read it from a book. So you could read all you want about the Parisian culture, but if somebody who's lived there their whole life, they could give you an insight that's going to be unique and certainly important and relevant to us in operating our business. So we're going to need salespeople, we're going to need marketing people, we're going to need people to engage in personal selling on our behalf. So in some cases, we might want to send, if you will, people from headquarters, people from our home country. When we do that, these employees are referred to as
Expatriates.
expatriates. Now, when we send expatriates into a given market, what are some of the challenges? Do you think that they're often very successful, or does it depend? And if so, what does it depend on? So in other words, what we're talking about is we're going to send Stepanski to Paris. Now he's all ready to go. He's got his bags packed. But the question is he going to be successful there?
Hell yeah.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, he has to you know get a sense of what, you know, the differences in culture. He's got to familiarize himself not only with the culture but maybe also the legal aspects. What's expected in the workplace. What maybe even you know, what about his family? Is his family going with him? Are they, you know?
Yes,
how long
that's a
is
very
he going
good
to be
point.
there? You know, does he plan on coming back? A lot of different.
You plan on coming back. They want to know. You haven't even got there yet. They want to know if you're coming back.
Oh no.
You're going to reserve your decision, right, until a later date.
The French sway me away.
So Ezra raised some really good points. What about the family? There's got to be preparation.
Oh, nice.
Too often, companies and employees see it as a boondoggle. What does that mean? If it's a boondoggle, right? They see it as like, oh, it's, you know, it's like an excursion. It's like a vacation. So you go over there, and they miss the fact that Ezra is raising, that you need to be prepared. You need to prepare the person that's going to be the expatriate. What would be one aspect that is important to manage? How are we going to prep Stepanski before we send him over there? Who could give us like one example?
Train him in French.
Yeah. Parlez-vous français?
You know.
Now it sounds like a blinding glimpse at the obvious, but often companies, they send people over there. The people can't speak the local language. Now at least you gotta, you know, get through some training, and you gotta make sure there's gotta be somebody who's responsible for monitoring that he's actually gone through the training. Because sometimes what companies say in their defense is, before we sent him over there, we gave him the opportunity to do 6 months worth of training so that he could learn to speak French. They said, it's not our fault he didn't go to the class, right? We could barely get him to come to this class, no less go to French class, right, Stepanski? So, look, he says yes. So, we have to make sure that the people that we're sending overseas are going to be properly trained. And we need to make sure that that happens. Afterwards, there can't be any finger pointing, well, he didn't go. But what do you mean he didn't go? The kid can't speak a lick of French. Then there's got to be some shared responsibility there. You have to make sure, we have to make sure that we set them up for success, because it's expensive to send people overseas. So if you have expatriates working on behalf of the company overseas, that's very costly. Because we're going to have to put him through this training, relocate him and his family. Go ahead, Blanco.
I was just gonna say, aren't you also taking a risk that like Stepanski, when he gets to France, is just gonna like no one's monitoring you, so he could just go off and do his own thing. You're not even doing any work.
Well, that's what I would definitely caution them about that.
Don't worry about
But
Paris.
there's going to be he's going to be an office, right? So there's an office there, and so he's going to be one person that's in the sales office there, sales and marketing office, and he's going to report to somebody. He's going to have a manager. We're assuming in this situation. We might also consider him being the one that's responsible for managing the entire office. That's a possibility too, but there's certain issues there as well. But headquarters, certainly has an interest in understanding firsthand, if you will, what's going on, and he's going to bring insights from headquarters in terms of the objectives, firsthand the objectives, what it is that the company is trying to achieve. But we're spending a substantial amount of money to teach him French, move him there, move his family, get his kids into school. A significant amount of expenses involved there. Go ahead, Evan.
I think you also have to prepare if it doesn't work out. I remember last semester we saw that video segment that they sent that guy, I think it was to France or something, and it really didn't work out, and he came back and blamed the company, and they had given away his job already. And they only offered him like a lesser, like something under whatever he had before.
Yeah, so he couldn't get his old job back.
Yeah. So
They said they weren't going to fire him, but they would give him a
lower rank job or something.
yeah, a lower level job in headquarters because he wasn't successful. So in that case, that individual wasn't successful. What else? Is there anything else that we need to consider? Good, Evan.
Is schools for the children?
Yeah. So, I mean, just imagine. I mean, what do? You pack a suitcase, you get on a plane, and there needs to be, the company needs to arrange
Buy him a house.
for support, find them housing. Just imagine, trying to find an apartment in New York City, the challenges associated with that. What about if you're going to be living outside of your home country for a year, 2 years, 3 years? You need to find a place to live. How do you know where you should be looking for an apartment or a house? How do you know that you're getting a fair deal? So there's a lot of support that the company needs to provide. And sometimes it doesn't work out because even though there was a plan, it wasn't flawlessly executed. Even a great plan, poorly executed, can fail. It's not enough to have a great plan. But you could also have not a great plan, but let's say a good plan that is flawlessly executed that could be very successful. And that's one of the challenges associated with having, for example, a code of conduct in a company, or a code of ethics, or a vision statement, or a statement of values. That's meaningless. It's only meaningful if you could bring that to life. It can't just be something that's on the company's website. It's got to be something that the employees at all levels internalize, and it becomes real. So although there are a large number of expatriates that are in the field, it doesn't always work out. And companies are constantly weighing the costs and the benefits of having expatriates working abroad. What's another alternative? What's another alternative? What's a virtual expatriate?
Was that someone who they take from a different country? Not some, like, instead of taking someone from your home country and sending him to a foreign country, is that someone who they take from, imagine they took someone from London and brought him to France? Is that?
Well, what's the alternative? So suppose we don't move you there. Is there some middle ground where if, what was it?
Online?
Yeah, why can't we have a weekly video conference?
Yeah.
Or go there once a month? Or maybe you and 3 people or 6 people. So maybe a whole team is involved. So in an organization, there's going to be a number of counterparts. So there's going to be a sales manager in every market And depending on how the organization is set up, you might have one sales manager per market and 20 sales representatives per market. But for every sales manager in the home country, there's a sales manager in the host country or the host countries. Maybe it makes sense for those individuals to meet once a month or have a video conference. So we need to decide on what the level of centralization is going to be in the organization. Is the organization going to be centralized, or is it going to be decentralized? Or is there some middle ground? What does that mean when we talk about centralization? So you're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. What does it mean and you have sales offices in 20 different countries around the world? What's the implications if the organization is centralized versus decentralized? How is the company going to operate differently in those situations? What do you think? If the company is decentralized, what does that suggest? If you're in 20 different markets, what does that suggest? So you have a country manager. You have a country manager in that particular market, and that person has a lot of autonomy to make the decisions that are best for that particular division, for that particular subsidiary, for that particular strategic business unit. So there might be very little integration with the home office, with headquarters. And there's some advantages to that, and there's certainly some disadvantages to that. If the company is very centralized, then more of the decision making is being made in headquarters. Why do you think that might not be such a good idea?
Because they're not as familiar with the ongoings of the company in that market, specifically as much as the people who are working there are.
Yeah, so you're far removed from the marketplace. We have to ask ourselves a candid question: who's in the best position to make the judgment? Who's in the best position to make the best decision? Is it the person that's located in the host country, or is it somebody back in headquarters? Because judgment is very important. You can't look the answers up. Decisions are made based on experience and judgment. So who can we rely on to make those decisions? Now remember, we said that some managers, some executives have this ethnocentric mentality. Which means what? What does that suggest? If the senior executives, let's say in headquarters, have this ethnocentric approach to management.
Well, they may be somewhat skewed because they don't know exactly what's going on in terms of that country. I mean, I'm sure they have a general idea, but the managers over there will definitely have a more specific knowledge of how to maybe tackle certain things, and that probably should be done there.
And then what else? What's another part of that?
Say, it worked for our country, it'll work for their country.
So they think that they already have the right answer. So they're very opinionated. Instead of thinking, well, there's people on the team that have a different opinion, maybe that's something that we should consider. They feel that, well, it's worked here, we should do the same thing in that market. And remember, we said one size does not fit all. The key to our success is going to be to customize our marketing plan to meet the needs of the local market. So that suggests very often more of a decentralized organizational structure. Do you agree? Does that make sense? How does Johnson & Johnson operate, for example?
Don't they have a lot of different like headquarters over? Isn't there like their main headquarters in New Jersey that have different like headquarters over?
Yeah, the Johnson & Johnson company is headquartered in New Jersey, and they have a family of companies. They have a large number of strategic business units. Like, for example, McNeil Labs is one of their SBUs. McNeil Labs is the division that makes Tylenol, for example. And while all the strategic business units at Johnson & Johnson adhere to the J&J credo, which when people are hired into the organization, they go through training. Everybody goes through training on the company's credo, because that's an important part of their organizational culture. But the company prides itself in having a mostly decentralized organizational structure. So the company operates its organization in many different countries, and they rely upon nationals to make the best decision for the company. So they invest in hiring the best people into the organization. But culture is something that could be a challenge for us if we operate outside of the home country. So different things are going to motivate different people, and that's something that we need to be sensitive to if you're operating in a host country. So, for example, in some organizations, in some cultures, some organizational cultures, there's an expectation of a top-down management style, and in other cases, a bottom-up management style. What's the difference? And this could really make or break you. If you don't understand in that particular culture, in that particular market, what's expected from you as a manager, as an executive, you're not going to be able to motivate, influence, inspire, lead the organization. What's the difference? What's the difference between a top-down management approach versus bottom-up? What do you think?
I always thought they were called like horizontal and vertical. Remember, I learned about it in management, and the vertical is when you have your CEO, your CFO, and everything is going to chain of command from the top management to the middle management to the lower management, and just run like that. Versus horizontal, where you really have a lot of collaboration from everybody. People are more empowered, to do their jobs, so they can collaborate. Generally, there will be upper management, but it's not working in the same structure.
Absolutely, that's a really good example. Anybody want to add to that? Nobody? So what Harvey is saying is that you could have an organizational structure where collaboration is important. It's important that the executive deploy a participatory management approach. So the employees need to have involvement in the decision-making process. We need to get buy-in from the employees. That's very different from an organizational structure where the senior manager makes the decisions in a vacuum, if you will, in isolation, and doesn't solicit input from people throughout the organization. And that's why we often refer to it as in another model as top-down. So the senior management team makes the decisions at the top, and then it's translated down to everybody throughout the organization. Now, of course, if you're a part of the senior management team, you can consult with everybody about every decision. But we're talking about major decisions in the organization. So if you're working on a strategic business plan for the organization, then as part of that, we need to do a situation analysis. And that means that we should get input from a significant number of people in the organization. We need to get their perspective. Some cultures require that. They require that they contribute and provide input into the process. Now, if you go there without that mindset and without a commitment to that approach, then how could you possibly be successful? Now, in some markets, they're okay. Just come in, tell us what to do. You're the boss. You're the boss man. In China, the boss is called the Laoban. So you're the boss. Whatever you say, boss. And you develop your plan, and the employees are okay. Whatever you decide, just tell us what to do. Now, you might ask yourself, well, am I really going to be able to make the best decision without the input from other people? Very often, no. So you need to get input from at least some people in the organization, because to be candid, how would we make these decisions on our own? We can't possibly know everything. We can't possibly have all the facts for us to make the decision. So even with a top-down approach to management, we're still going to need to get input from people throughout the organization. But we're at two extremes. One in which there's a heavy amount of input and participation in the management process and the decision-making process, and one in which there's very little, if any. Now that could be your Achilles heel. That could very well be the reason why you fail. You can't go there and think, well, this is the way I manage my team in the home country. You won't be successful. You need to have the buy-in from the employees, which means what? What does that mean when we talk about the buy-in from the employees? What is it that we're hoping is going to happen?
They're motivated to give back to the organization.
Yeah, they're motivated, and that they're going to support the program and the plan that we developed. Because remember, it's not enough to just have a plan, it's got to be implemented. Well, who's going to implement it? We have to rely on other people to implement it. So they have to believe in it. Yes, this is the right thing to do. And give it 120%. But if we don't have their buy-in, then they're going to be like, they're going to feel that there wasn't any opportunity for them to give input, and they're not going to try. And if they don't try, then we're not going to be successful. Do you think that's realistic?
Why not?
So you think that's true, right? Yeah, we shouldn't, even though one of the keys to leadership is power. So one of the keys to leadership is power, and there's different sources of power. One of them is legitimate power, which means that people do what we say because, let's say, we're the vice president of the organization. But that's not always enough. Because you might have legitimate power, and you have also coercive power, And reward power, coercive power means that you could punish them. So if they don't do what you say, then they are fired. But for some people, that's not enough. So they're not intimidated by the fact that you could fire them. Referent power suggests that they're going to honor your request because they like us, they respect us. And in some cases, because we're the expert, we're the subject matter expert. So we have a lot of credibility, so they're going to do what we say. But why do I mention that? Because I don't want you to think that just because you have the legitimate power, that you're going to be successful with this top-down management approach. That we're being naive to think, what do you mean? I'm the boss. You told me I'm the Lauban. But that doesn't mean that they're going to effectively implement the strategic plan that we put together. So we need to change. You're not going to change the culture of a country, are you? I mean, are we going to be able to do that? So as a manager, we need to adapt. Now you might want to try and incorporate some aspects of the corporate culture from the home country. Employees might be receptive to that. But you're not going to change the culture of the people, of the entire country. So we need to adjust our management style, our leadership style, if we're going to be successful.
Question. Are there ever times where certain certain cultures are, even though you're setting up a company in another country, certain parts of your culture could actually be more efficient than the way they operate?
Yeah, it could be.
Like I was talking to someone who I don't know, they have business dealings in Qatar, whatever it's called. So they said when they email someone from that from that place, the person takes a week to get back to them. And it said it's very inefficient. And but somebody explained to her, one of the locals explained to her, that's normal here. To take a week to get back to someone is normal. She said, but things would be so much more efficient if it was 2 or 3 days to get back to someone.
Yeah, so in some cases the level of urgency varies from market to market. Some markets are less time sensitive. Their time is not an issue, so they feel a week is okay. They're not. They don't sense that urgent need for a response. And yeah, that's a challenge. That's something that that we have to address. Now, in some cases, maybe that is something that we could resolve. Maybe we could have standards, performance standards that say that you'll respond to emails within 48 hours. I think it's reasonable to attempt to do that, but you can't have that standard for everything in the organization, right? We need to decide what are our priorities. So it would be interesting to understand in that particular market, what do they consider is more important? What is more urgent? Maybe the response is, maybe it's not a cultural thing, maybe in that particular scenario that you're talking about, maybe they said, well, I took a week to get back to you in headquarters because, you know why? Because I was dealing with customers. So then, what could you say? It's not that, in that particular market they only work 4 hours a day, or they get, 10 weeks vacation a year. It's, maybe that's legitimate. I was in the field with the customers. But maybe you might still say, I know, but still.
Weak.
You still might try to address that. So you can't have like the inmates running the asylum. You need to have some guidelines, and there's got to be priorities. There's got to be shared objectives. So it's reasonable to try and implement that in the organization. You can't always let the nationals push back and say, well, that's just the way we do it here. Well, that's not gonna
No one cut it.
yeah, that's not gonna work. So there's got to be adaptation on both parties' part. But the thing is that there's got to be shared objectives throughout the entire organization. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Everybody in the organization has got to be working towards the same objectives. And that's going to help us prioritize our efforts. Let's take a couple of minutes and go over the quiz. See if we could get through that. All right, who's going to read the first question about communications? Somebody, anybody. Go ahead, everybody's looking at the quiz here? Go ahead, Harvey.
The blank communications are composed of advertising, sales promotions, trade shows, personal selling, direct selling. B, integrated marketing.
Right, so integrated marketing communications,
That's fancy. Yeah.
IMC, referred to as IMC, integrated marketing communications, are composed of advertising, sales promotions, trade shows, personal selling, direct selling, and public relations. And why do we refer to it as integrated marketing communications?
More than one channel.
And what else? Why is that significant? So what is it about the fact that we have multiple approaches to communicating with the target audience?
They're all kind of trying to get at the same thing.
Well, it's got to be integrated. So it can't be whether it's the trade show or whether it's public relations, whatever it is, advertising, everything has got to be integrated. The message has got to be similar, if not identical. It's got to reinforce the entire campaign, the entire communications plan. So everything has got to tie together. We talk about touch point mapping. Touch point mapping looks at all the points of contact that the customer has with the organization. So we have a certain brand identity, a certain personality for the organization, for our brand. We have a certain image. There's certain associations with our brand. That has got to permeate all our marketing communications. So the way that we implement our website, for example, the way that we implement the displays at the trade shows, our advertising, all of that has got to have basically the same look and feel, positioning, brand identity. It's got to be consistent. So it can't be that you just have these like one-off activities. Everything has got to be tied together, which is critical. Questions about that? So whatever you're doing in advertising, even within advertising, your print ads have got to reinforce your TV commercials. It's got to be one campaign. It's not, oh, we're doing print ads, that's separate, we let Daniel work on that, and nobody talked to Daniel, he's working on print ads, and Reuven is doing TV commercials, and we just he's very creative, we just let him do his own thing. No, everything is part of one campaign. One integrated campaign. Billboards. Radio spots. Everything has got to tie together. All right, next question. Go ahead. The next question is about sales promotions. Go ahead, Ezra.
Sales promotions are blank efforts directed to the consumer or retailer to achieve such specific objectives as consumer product trial or immediate purchase. Let's say long-term efforts.
Well, generally, sales promotions are seen as short-term. Short-term efforts that we're trying to get trial or, in some cases, repeat purchase. Why do we think it's short-term? What is it that we know about promotions that's relevant here? Why would we say it's a short-term effort?
Well, maybe because if it doesn't work right away, then you okay, take a different plan of action.
Well, certainly we're going to have a number of sales promotions that we're going to implement, but we will know, we're going to know pretty quickly whether or not it had an immediate impact. Yeah, Danny?
The whole idea of promotion is that promotion is a limited thing, that's not like constant.
Right, so we might have a promotion that might last a day, it might last a week, and those results are going to be obvious in a very short period of time, whether or not the promotion was effective. And importantly, we're going to see a spike in sales, but then after the promotion is over, what generally happens? Sales are going to go back down. Because what happens is, very often, we overstock the trade or overstock the customer. What does that mean? We're talking about sales promotions. Why would we say that? What does that mean to say we overstock the customer?
We want them to, they end up buying more than they normally would.
Yeah, they buy more than they normally would. So when orange juice is on sale, so instead of buying 1 gallon, they might buy 5 gallons. And then that means next week, they might not buy any. So we refer to that as overstocking. In some cases, that happens at the retail level as well. You had retailers will buy certain things from the wholesaler when it's on sale, when there's a promotion. So they'll buy more inventory than what they need, and then the next week, they're going to purchase less. So it's important for us to understand the impact of a sales promotion. That generally it's short-term, it's a temporary increase in sales. Why would we do that? What would be certainly one really good reason why we would have a promotion?
We need cash quick.
You might have excess inventory on hand and you need to raise cash. So you might have too much money tied up in your working capital, too much money tied up in inventory. So you want to move excess inventory. It might be that there's a chance of spoilage as well, that the orange juice might go bad. So sell it. Better to sell it at a discount and at least recover some of our product costs than for an entire batch of orange juice, 1 million containers go bad.
I want to also do it to make a strategic move against a competitor.
Might be you want to try and steal share from your competitor. In some markets, price is going to be a tactic that could enable us to do that. What about from a retailer's perspective, sales promotions also increase what we call foot traffic, which means that it brings people into the store, which is an important tool. Now keep in mind that a sales promotion is not the same thing generally as a loss leader. What is a loss leader? So it's one thing for something to be a sales promotion, for it to be on sale. A loss leader means that you're selling it below your cost generally. Maybe for the reason that Daniel said, that you're trying to beat out a competitor. So it's one thing to be selling a product for 10% off or 20% off, but in some cases it might be 80% off. You know, people think that orange juice is really $2.50 for half a gallon because there's so many promotions that are 2 for $5 for a half a gallon of orange juice. But a half a gallon of orange juice is not $2.50. And one of the risks that we run is that people expect something is heavily promoted, like orange juice, heavily promoted by retailers, whether it's funded by the manufacturer or not, because they want to definitely increase foot traffic to the store. The perceived value is going to decrease. So it's not that at first they realize, well, we're getting something that's worth $4 for $2.50. It's a good value. But then after a while, it's not that case anymore. Now the perceived value is now $2.50. That's one of the things I had cautioned you about as it relates to Mercedes-Benz. Of course, they sell a lot of Mercedes at $30,000 because the perception is generally that they're getting a $100,000 car for $30,000. But after a while, the perceived value is going to become $30,000. Especially, and there are so many print ads where you see the Mercedes logo and symbol, and next to that it says $29,999. Now, after you see that a number of times, what does that mean? That's a type of brand association. That means your brand is being associated with that price point. How many times do you have to see that before you're like, oh yeah, I get it. That's a $30,000 car. Next question. Go ahead. Number 3. Let's go, let's go. Go ahead, Danny.
Of the 7 steps in developing international advertising, blank almost always represents the most daunting task for international marketing managers. Is that E?
Well, what's the best answer? What do you guys think?
E.
A. Developing the messages. Why?
You have to know how people are going to respond to them and how people will process them.
Absolutely. So the way that people respond to the message is something that's very often difficult to anticipate and requires a lot of effort. Because in different markets, people are going to interpret the message in different ways. Or it may be something that's not relevant to them. So remember we talked about, for example, the camera. We said in some markets it's ease of use, but not in every market. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the most important message. In some markets, we said what's more important? Instead of ease of use for a camera?
Pixel, the quality, right?
So the quality, but we also said that the
Just functionality
functionality.
altogether.
Because remember we said though that quality in photography, we said is probably a point of parity. That in every market, that's a minimum requirement, is that it takes a good picture. And in some cases from a technology standpoint, that means it's a high number of megapixels. So that's really the minimum requirement, because why would you is there such a thing when you take a bad picture? I mean, not because you weren't smiling, but it's like, if you can't see the picture, then what's the sense? So we said that's a point of parity. But we said there's points of difference, and that varies from market to market. The unique selling proposition is something that varies from market to market. So in some markets we said that ease of use, this idea of point and click, is important. And in other markets, price. Remember we said in other markets, that's not so much of an issue. It's more of price, affordability. So we have to customize the messaging so that people are willing to buy the product. All right. And that's on page 462. So developing the message, not that the other things are not important, of course. Selecting effective media, that's going to vary from market to market, is important. Executing the campaign is always a challenge. Getting a budget, having communication goals, of course all those things are relevant and important in international advertising, but the thing that's really the most difficult, the most daunting, the most problematic, if you will, is developing messages. Number 4. Go ahead. Somebody. Go ahead, Ruben.
International communications process. An international marketing executive with a product message to communicate acts as a message source.
Right. B, message source on page 467. And what did we say that was important in terms of communication? We said communication is a two-way street. That it's not enough for us to send a message, for us to be the source of the message, but
They have to read it correctly.
yeah, they have to receive it and read it correctly, be able to decode it. That's our responsibility. We can't come back and say, oh, well, they didn't understand. And that's our job. We have to make sure that they are able to decode the message and that the message is relevant. Number 5, in an advertisement for perfume, the perfume was presented against a backdrop of rain that, for Europeans, symbolized a clean, cool, refreshing image. But to Africans, this was a symbol of fertility. The ad prompted many viewers many viewers to ask if the perfume was effective against infertility. This miscommunication indicates a problem associated with which of the following steps of an international communication process? A, encoding the message. So all of these things that we've been talking about, whether it's the color or the humor or the taste, the values, however the ad is executed, is going to impact how the message is processed.
Why is that not an issue with decoding?
So on the company's part.
Yeah, from our perspective as an organization, we didn't encode the message properly. And it's not that they decoded it incorrectly. We didn't do enough research on that market. We should know what the perception would be of that type of ad. We should know, based on that culture, what is rain, what is that going to suggest? And so we see here, this is a good example of where they thought, well, Europeans thought that, yeah, if you see rain in an ad, that suggests something that's clean and crisp and refreshing. But in the culture that they suggest here, they said that Africans, though, see that as something tied to nature and fertility. So that's our responsibility to make that distinction. Number 6, which of the following are especially vulnerable as an EU member state decides which area of regulation should apply to these services? The best answer there is internet services, E. Internet services are especially vulnerable as EU member states decide which area of regulation should apply to these services. Number 7, which of the following statements is true regarding the cost of media? The best answer on page 478 is D. The per contract cost for advertisements varies widely from country to country. That's very true. Number 8, the answer is A. Star TV was the first to broadcast across Asia. That's on page 482. Not Al Jazeera, not ESPN. Number 9, according to the text for consumer products, which of the following is the major limitation of the internet? And
Coverage.
what do you think about cost?
I think it's having
Depends on the place. Somewhere like Australia, cost may be a problem because they sell it more expensively there. But for most places, I think it's not an issue.
Yeah, coverage. I would say the best answer is coverage. B, the major limitation of internet is coverage, which just quickly, somebody tell us, what does that mean when we say coverage?
Not everybody has it.
Yeah, that is, you don't have access. In some markets, we're all like, everybody has, we have internet on our phone, or we've got internet in our kitchen, but that's not the case everywhere. All right, last question. A new medium of advertising includes private cars that are painted with advertisements for products and serve as moving billboards as they travel around. This medium is known as, no, somebody? Is generally found in Spain on page 489. All right, in fact, I have like 75 cars in Madrid that drive around with these mobile billboards, if you will. All right, so see you next time. Do good things. Zokowitz. Sir. When are you going to cook for us?
When it goes.
Do it, it's gonna go.